He was 27 years old. He wore the robes of the Son of Heaven, and for one brief summer in 1898, he tried to change the destiny of an empire that had ruled for 2,000 years. 100 days later, he would be a prisoner in his own palace, and China would lose its last peaceful chance to reform itself from within. This is the story of the Guangxu Emperor and the reform that died before it could breathe. By the late 19th century, the Qing dynasty was in trouble. China had once called itself the Middle Kingdom, the center of civilization. For centuries, that confidence felt justified. Its bureaucracy was vast, its culture refined, its economy enormous. But the world had changed. Steam engines, industrial factories, ironclad warships, these were not Chinese inventions in 1898. They belonged to Europe and to Japan. China had already suffered humiliation. The Opium Wars forced it open to foreign trade. Unequal treaties carved out spheres of influence. Western gunboats anchored in Chinese rivers. And then came the shock that shattered the illusion of superiority. In 1894, China went to war with Japan. It expected to win. Instead, it was crushed. The First Sino-Japanese War lasted less than a year. Japan's modernized navy destroyed China's fleets. Its army swept through Korea and into Manchuria. The Treaty of Shimonoseki forced China to surrender territory and pay enormous indemnities. A former tributary state had defeated the empire that once saw itself as the center of Asia. For many in Beijing, this was no longer a warning, it was an existential crisis. And at the center of that crisis stood the young Guangxu Emperor.
Guangxu had ascended the throne as a child. Real power belonged to his aunt, the formidable Empress Dowager Cixi. For decades, Cixi had navigated court politics with remarkable skill. She survived rebellions, foreign invasions, and factional struggles. She believed in cautious reform, but only reform that preserved imperial authority. Guangxu, however, came to age in a different world. He read widely. He listened to reform-minded scholars. He understood that the problem was not simply military weakness, it was structural. China's education system still revolved around memorizing Confucian classics for civil service exams. Government positions were filled by literary skill, not technical expertise. Industrial development lagged behind the West. The empire was trying to fight modern wars with medieval institutions. Among the emperor's closest influences was a scholar named Kang Youwei. Kang believed that Confucianism could be reinterpreted, that reform was not a betrayal of Chinese tradition, but its continuation. He argued that Japan had succeeded because it embraced constitutional government, industrialization, and educational reform. China, he insisted, must do the same or perish. In June 1898, Guangxu made his move. What followed would be known as the 100 Days Reform. The pace was dizzying. Edicts poured out of the Forbidden City almost daily. The emperor ordered the creation of modern schools teaching science and engineering. He restructured the civil service examinations to include practical subjects. He encouraged the establishment of newspapers and private industry. Plans were drafted for a constitutional monarchy. Bureaucratic offices were reorganized. Corruption was targeted. Western military training was proposed. In just over 3 months, Guangxu attempted to redesign the machinery of the Qing state. It was ambitious, it was bold, and it was deeply threatening. Because reform did not happen in a vacuum. Every decree displaced someone. Conservative officials saw their positions endangered. Bannerman elites feared losing stipends. Court factions whispered that the emperor was moving too fast, that he was influenced by dangerous radicals. And above all, Empress Dowager Cixi watched. At first, she remained silent, but as reforms accelerated, alarm spread through the palace. The emperor was bypassing established channels. He was empowering young reformers. He was hinting at limits to imperial autocracy. To conservatives, this was not modernization. It was chaos. And then came a rumor that would seal Guangxu's fate. It was said that reformers planned to sideline Cixi permanently, perhaps even detain her to prevent interference. Whether true or not, the fear was enough. On September 21, 1898, the coup began.
Cixi acted swiftly. Troops loyal to her surrounded key locations in Beijing. Reformist officials were arrested. 6 leading reformers were executed. Guangxu was placed under house arrest in a secluded island palace within the Forbidden City. He would never rule independently again. The 100 Days Reform was over, 103 days after it began. Why did it fail? The answer lies in timing, power, and fear. China's bureaucracy was vast and conservative. Reform threatened entrenched interests that had survived for generations. There was no broad political coalition to defend the emperor's changes. Unlike Japan's Meiji Restoration, which was backed by a decisive group of reformist elites, Guangxu lacked military control. And in the Qing court, military power mattered more than vision. Cixi did not oppose modernization outright. In fact, after suppressing the reformers, she would later adopt certain changes: military reorganization, educational reforms, even plans to abolish the traditional exam system. But by crushing the 100 Days Reform, she sent a clear message. Transformation would not come from below. It would not come rapidly, and it would not challenge imperial authority. Yet history does not pause for caution. Only 2 years later, the Boxer Rebellion erupted, an anti-foreign uprising that spiraled into international war. An 8-nation alliance invaded Beijing. The Qing dynasty was forced to pay crushing indemnities once again. The empire looked increasingly fragile. By 1911, revolution erupted. The Qing dynasty collapsed. China entered a chaotic era of warlords, civil war, and fragmentation. Some historians argue that if the 100 Days Reform had succeeded, if Guangxu had been able to modernize the state in 1898, the dynasty might have survived as a constitutional monarchy. Perhaps China's transition into the 20th century would have been smoother. Perhaps the violent decades that followed might have been avoided. But perhaps not. Reform is not just about ideas. It is about power, and whether those who hold it are willing to let it change. Guangxu had the vision. He did not have the leverage. The emperor lived on in quiet captivity. For 10 years, he remained a prisoner within the palace walls. He died in 1908, just 1 day before Empress Dowager Cixi. For decades, rumors circulated that he had been poisoned. In 2008, scientific tests confirmed it. His remains contained extremely high levels of arsenic. Whether ordered by Cixi or others fearing instability, the result was the same. The emperor who tried to save China did not live to see its transformation. But his failure mattered, because it proved something critical. China could no longer ignore the modern world. The question was not whether reform would happen, it was who would control it and at what cost. Within a generation, revolutionaries would overthrow the dynasty. Within half a century, a new political order would reshape the nation entirely. The summer of 1898 became a symbol, a moment when peaceful change was possible and lost. History rarely offers second chances. Guangxu took his, and it slipped through his fingers in just 100 days. If you enjoy stories like this, moments where a single decision reshaped the fate of millions, subscribe for more forgotten chapters of history.